What do you think is the biggest mistake people make in relationships?
Oh my gosh, what a big question. I would say one of the biggest mistakes that people make is confusing their partner for somebody from their past and not being aware of it. Usually that's a parental figure, the mom or the dad, and then acting from that wounded inner child rather than bringing their adult self forward and seeing their partner as an enemy. Because if you look at people's relationship histories, myself included, there's a lot of chaos and us versus them and people becoming enemies in the end. And isn't it strange that we go out into the world looking for somebody to share love with, and then more often than not, we just hurt each other repeatedly, and then we blame each other, and then we go off and try to find somebody new, and we just keep repeating the cycle. And that's not love. That's not healthy love. That's just wounds repeating the cycle. And so what we have to realize is that often we're actually in relationship with a projection of the person who hurt us that we didn't heal with.
Wow. Give me an example.
For me, it was always my mom, right? Even with my past marriage that I talked about, that projection for me was my mom. So I was projecting all of my anger, all of my disgust, all of my sadness and my hurt onto this person that I was in relationship with, and he me. And so on an unconscious level, we didn't have trust, we didn't have safety, and we were on opposite teams because we were punishing each other for the ways that we had been hurt.
From the past,
Yes.
not from what they were doing.
Well, there were obviously things that we were both doing that were out of alignment, but the ability to recognize why we were doing those things wasn't there. We all do things when we're reacting from a past wound, but it's coming from somewhere. And it's often that past shadow figure, that person in the unconscious mind that represents the mom or the dad or the caregiver who didn't show up for us and didn't provide the security and the love and the safety that we needed to develop that whole sense of self. And so we have to go back and do that repair work and then grow up. We have to mature.
Yeah. We have to emotionally mature and go back into the wounded psychological phases of our childhood and mend those phases.
Yeah.
And create new meaning around what those memories were so they can support us now as opposed to hurt us now. Is that right?
And recognize in those moments when that inner child, that wounded, scared child is coming to the front and center, and be able to access our inner mother or inner father
And self-soothe.
And parent them, self-soothe.
In a healthy way.
Yeah.
Not through numbing or alcohol or addictions or whatever it might be.
Exactly. Shopping, right. Netflix, whatever, And then once we have that relationship built, we can actually start doing the deeper work with our partners. I don't know if you've ever heard of Imago work with Harville and Helen. Harville Hendricks, he and Helen Hunt, they wrote the book, Getting the Love You Want. And they're elders. I've studied with them.
I've heard of that book, yeah.
Yeah. And, they're them and the Gottmans. Those are sort of the elders that we owe so much gratitude to for all of this work that we now access and even many of us teach. And their whole model is about working with the inner child, which they don't really say it that way, but it's that hurt child and the parent figure, and seeing how much we choose our partners based on an exact template of who our parents were, both the good and the bad. So for example, when Ben and I went to an Esalen retreat years ago before we had our daughter, and we did a retreat with them. And one of the questions was, what is the thing that excites you most about your partner? What drew you to your partner most? And what is the thing that your partner does that hurts you the most?
Same thing.
Different, but also they ask you that about your parent.
Oh.
And so when I looked at the thing that I loved most about my mom was the exciting, spontaneous adventures we would go on.
Right, the play times every now and then.
And the things that I didn't like the most or that hurt me the most was her emotional unavailability and abandoning me when I needed her. And then when I looked at how I had related to Ben, it was virtually the same, because we were playing out some avoidant, anxious patterns early on. And it was stunning to see that I also fit the exact template of his childhood where I was critical of him, and
He had a critical mom or something.
he
Yeah.
had a critical parent who he didn't feel seen and appreciated by. And that was the thing that I would do, and sadly sometimes still do. If I'm not being my best self, I'll get critical. And so we fit these exact templates of each other's parents. But if we're aware of it, then we can also say, well, what is that thing that you really needed? What is that thing that you really needed to feel loved? And then we do that thing every single day. And so we're healing each other's wounds, healing each other's child selves by essentially reparenting our partner's inner child.
So you're reparenting his inner child,
And he's reparenting mine.
Really?
And we're reparenting ourselves as
I was
well.
gonna say, because if we only do it to the other person and not to ourselves, is that going to support us long term?
No, of course not. Though
Doing it ourselves and supporting, yeah.
Yeah, because there's this, especially in the conscious relationship realm, we hear a lot of these memes and this kind of rhetoric that we should be ultra independent. And it's not said that way, but it's like you're responsible for your own emotions. Nobody can make you feel anything. And you're only responsible for you and them for them. And it's not your partner's job to heal you. And while that's true that it's not your partner's job to heal you, when you enter into a partnership, you become each other's allies. And you both bring wounds to the table. And it actually is a gift to your partner to say, hey, what's something that I could do to nurture and nourish your inner child? And here's what you could do to nurture and nourish mine. And that's a gift that we give. And it's not about expecting it or demanding it. But if we truly want to heal in relationship, then we actually do take on each other's baggage as a team. And that's not something that a lot of people talk about these days, because we're in this far swing to the other end of the pendulum, because we've gone from these like very enmeshed relationships. Now we want to go to this total ultra independence. But somewhere in the middle lies the beauty of doing the dance together and saying, you know what? I'm your ally in healing. I'm going to be your partner in healing. How can I love you better? Here's how you can love me better. And let's do this thing.
I think it's wise to do that, whether it's daily or weekly. It doesn't have to be every day for everyone. I every week, probably, I ask Martha in some way about that. And I like to say, do you feel seen, celebrated, and supported? And if not, what can I do to support you in feeling seen, celebrated, and supported more?
Yeah.
She always says yes, she does. So it's like, it's being conscious on top of mind, whether it's daily or weekly, but just being actively supporting and a teammate to someone and an ally, not an enemy, I think is really powerful. Why do you think we repeat these negative patterns in relationships so frequently? We have a bad experience in one relationship, we look for someone new, and then it repeats. And then we do it again and again. Why does that happen for people?
We're looking for a resolution. In the back of our minds, we might not even be aware of it, but we're looking for a resolution to that thing that happened, or to that story that said you're not lovable, or that story that said you have to fight to earn love. And so somewhere in our minds, we're looking to prove that story true, or we're looking to complete the process. And so we look for somebody who matches the template, right, like we just talked about, so that we can perhaps do that work. And typically it hasn't worked out, because what we don't realize is that our partner is doing that exact same thing.
Right.
But with the self-awareness and the willingness piece, if we're both aware and we're like, okay, we both do have some stuff to work on here. Here's what I've got to work on. Here's what you want to work on. Do you want to do this together? With that frame, then we really can get on the same track together and team up and do that healing work. Otherwise, it just does repeat endlessly. And it's easy to just blame the other person. Well, there's something wrong with you. I'm just going to get rid of you and go out and find my soulmate.
Right, the next person. Yeah, exactly. Interesting. What was the best thing you did before getting married the second time?
Yeah.
And that really supported entering the marriage? And then what was the thing you wish you would have done before getting married this second time around, that maybe, we didn't have this conversation or create these agreements? Or
Yeah, the thing that I love that we did was we created shadow vows.
Shadow vows.
Yeah, and
What is
those were
that?
sort of we also call them ownership vows. So we wrote our sacred vows to each other, but then we also did ownership vows. And so at our wedding, we had a different type of wedding where we had everybody actually sat in a circle on the floor. Only the elders in our community sat on chairs, and we had all of these plush rugs everywhere. And we did a cacao ceremony and a group meditation. And then we stood in front of our community, and we had spent a month negotiating our shadow vows. And essentially we were calling out the parts of ourselves that were not yet healed, or some of the worst things that we're bringing to the relationship.
Things you don't like about yourself, or whatever.
Or the ways that we show up in a crappy way with our partner, which there's always ways, And so we did that. We wrote it down and we shared with each other, and we also allowed each other to give feedback before we did this.
Oh my gosh.
Like,
That's amazing.
Is there anything here, is there anything that I do that you want me to own? And we used that. We did that in front of our community. We stood and we owned,
Holy cow.
I own that I'm going to project my unhealed father wound onto you sometimes, and I promise that I'm going to always come back to love. That's the kind of vows that we said. And so it was very vulnerable and intimate, but everyone in our community got to witness, this is the true Sheleana and Ben. These are the things that they're working on. We're not painting this perfect picture. And then they vowed to hold us through that. And then every year, what we do is we take our shadow vows and we go through them together, and we say, oh, I think I've actually worked really well on this one. Maybe we should take this one off the list. Maybe that one has been completed. Or maybe we need to add this to the thing,
Right.
Maybe we need to work on this one. And so we actually reassess our vows. We sort of use it as like a template to check in, do a temperature check. And that has served us very well. And we've guided other couples through that as well. So that's the thing that I loved the most.
What's the thing you wish you would have done before marriage that you didn't do?
Definitely would have been more somatic work, more nervous system work. That's something that I started the year that we got married. And it was because when we got married,
intense.
4 years in, all of a sudden I started feeling like I needed to escape. My ego was like, oh God, get
I'm
me
now
out
committed,
of here.
get me out. Wow.
Yeah, and what have I done, right? Because what if this was the wrong decision? I'm going to look like a fool.
I should have waited 3 years and this and that, right?
Yeah, well, we had already been together 4 years, and I was like, we should have waited 7,
Right.
And the funny thing about that is because the 7-year itch, have you ever heard the 7-year itch thing?
Tell me.
Well, in Canada, maybe this is a Canadian thing, but they talk about the 7-year itch, where a lot of couples break up after 7 years.
Okay.
But then my friend told me that actually that has been proven untrue, and it's been proven that it's actually the 4-year itch. And we got married at 4 years, so I had all that stress for nothing.
Maybe this is the time to leave.
Yeah. But my nervous system didn't know how to stay. And so
because we've never been in a safe, committed, fully committed. Yeah.
And not in a relationship where I had all of the things. Like, we had good chemistry and we had the spiritual connection.
It was healthy.
It was always one or the other. And so my body was starting to freak out, and I wanted to run in the other direction, even though I was trying to tell myself I'm safe. And so I had to do some deep nervous system reworking to get into a place where I no longer felt like I needed to escape all of the time, even though I knew consciously that it was good to be where I was in this relationship. And that work is sort of what I ended up going and training in over the last 4 years, because it was so powerful for me. I realized this is the thing that we all need to do, is create security in our bodies and our nervous systems.